Welcome, true believers. Ow. So, I'm on my way to pick up a friend of mine by the name of James. And James, welcome to the podcast, everyone. And who is James? James is actually one of my oldest friends. We've been friends for a very long time, and he's heading over to my place. And we're going to hang out for a little bit. So, who is James, other than being a longtime friend of mine? James is the creator of a character by the name of Tigre. And who is Tigre? Well, for those of you familiar with any of my written work, I wrote a comic book called Symka that ran for 3 years. It was a monthly... comic script. The story was written out in comic script form, and it was published online by The Guild Companion. It ran for 3 years, monthly. There was a new issue every month, so basically a new full script was released every month. And I guess as a claim to fame, it is probably the more popular thing that I've done out of all my writing or anything else I've done. It was definitely a passion project for me. And Symka originated from a game that I ran that included my very good friend James and my very good friend Mark, who are both James first, but Mark second. They're my two longest running friends I've had in my life. So I ran a game for both of them. So just 2 players. It was run in the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game, MSH RPG, using the phase rip rules. And I ran a game for both of them. It was based off a very, very simple scenario. They created 2 characters that were really, really cool and very disparate from one another. And the character that Mark created, his name was Gideon, and we had a very satisfying character arc for him that ended at a certain stage. Tigre, on the other hand, also had a very interesting character arc, but his character continued on for a long number of years. And I think I would have to go as probably the longest running character in the game ever that I've run. And how long? 7 years was probably accurate, maybe longer. James could probably tell you different. He's really good with the math. I'm not so good with the math. But the character he created, I kind of really wanted to highlight it. El Tigre was of Spanish descent, or more specifically Mexican descent. He lived in the metropolis of Winnipeg in my gaming world, and he'd had a very varied background, a very complicated background, a very difficult background, I should say. And he'd suffered a lot as a character, and he really, when James created the character and his background, he really kind of put him through the ringer. Before the character actually played. So when he starts out the game, he was a trainer at a gym and making, I guess, okay money financially. And his best friend was Gideon, who had no money and was basically a homeless person that he took in, or so the story goes. So El Tigre started out in the Marvel role-playing game there was no levels in that game, but at one point we converted the rules over and went to the Mutants and Mastermind system, and basically that set it up at a level 10 character. And I'm pretty sure I'd have to look at the original character sheet, but we carried that character through from level 10. All the way to level 20 or 25 or something ridiculous like that. And his basic power set was pretty straightforward. He was He could jump. He had a blade called a kukri, Kukri, that was basically indestructible. And yeah, as pretty much was the shtick. Like, and the character's arc. We did a lot of things. I did a lot of things to put that character through hell. It was kind of funny, and I really enjoyed it. One of the recurring themes that happened throughout the game was there was a particular actress that had a thing for El Tigre, for his secret identity of Joaquin Ramirez. Really had a thing for him, and hired him as a personal trainer, and then kind of fell in love with him. And it was kind of a recurring theme. Basically, it was more of a rib to bug the crap out of James. But I mean, his character went from just being partnered up with this homeless guy. As his power levels raised, he eventually joined the Canadian Super Team, which was the team that basically controlled. It was like the Avengers of Canada in my world, and in my world, Winnipeg was the epicenter of the country. And I explained historically how Winnipeg became the capital of Canada and actually the capital of the world. It was basically the New York City of planet Earth. New York City did not have the status in my world that it does in the real world. And Winnipeg was the New York City. And anyway, long story short, this is where he lived. He lived in the New York of planet Earth. And he joined the preeminent super team that was created by the Canadian government to protect its shores. Strangely enough, particularly from the U.S., because the U.S. had some very corrupt individuals running their country. So the way it played out was I mean, he had an elevation from just kind of being a guy kind of getting by to joining the preeminent super team, the equivalent of the Avengers, I guess, and actually having a very prominent role on that team. And oh my God, the adventures with El Tigre and the way that James played him. I mean, he wasn't just a cool set of powers or a cool set of statistics or whatever. Like, he wasn't just, he was very agile, he was very this, he was very... No, it was beyond that. It was the characterization that James had created allowed me as a GamesMaster to basically go in and alter... Like, he left holes. He was very particular about not leaving too many holes, but he did leave holes that I was able to exploit and kind of have some fun with. And I created this tapestry to the character's past, and who he was and where he came from and where the kukri came from. It was this blade that was near indestructible, and like, where did he get this from? Like, how did that come about? And his power set was actually really cool. I mean, in comics, you generally see a guy kind of slugging it out, using his fists, if they had super strength. Just a lot of punching, but he actually, we used his leaping ability as where his strength came from. And he did a lot of kicking and a lot of leaping, and it was all centered around his leaping ability. And even his fighting style was based on that. And later it was adapted for the comic book that the fighting style he had wasn't based on anything. It wasn't based on the martial art or anything. It was based on his power. So using his leaping ability, he was able to channel that into a particular fighting style, probably similar to capoeira, which James has a healthy obsession with. And basically kind of created our own identity. Much like Spider-Man's fighting style in the comic books, it's not based on a particular martial art or a particular style. It's based on his abilities. And his ability to fight is entirely based on the powers he has. So his spider sense, his uncanny knack to be able to dodge danger. So when he's throwing a fist at someone, it's based on this spider-like agility and danger sense that he has. And that has become his fighting style. It wasn't years of training in a dojo and learning karate or kung fu or taekwondo. It was actually based upon his set of skills, his set of powers. And it wasn't a fighting power. It was, he's fighting based upon what his powers are. So I really liked that take that he took, and I don't know if James came up with it or I came up with it, but whatever, how it came about, it was just awesome. I really, really liked that idea. I mean, that's character building. You can say that you have, in D20 terms, you've got a +4 fighting, and your fighting is based off your strength. That's fine and dandy, but I like explaining where it comes from. Well, he's just a good fighter. Well, why is he a good fighter? What makes him a good fighter? Let's explain the science behind it, the physics of it, or whatever. And this is really what James came up with, that I think that in terms of characterization, it really defined his ability as a character to define his fighting style. And even his fighting style defined his fighting style was an extension of his personality. The way it all played out was just really, really well. And I have to say, in the pantheon of characters I've played with, and I've played with a lot of long-term characters in both Supers campaigns and currently now in D&D campaign setting. But I've done modern. El Tigre probably stands out as one, definitely a top 5 character, but probably ranked even better than that. Probably my favorite or second favorite character of all time that I've had the honor of GMing. It was just so much fun. There was so much I could do with him. I was able to tease him. I was able to tease James as a human being, but I was also able to, just have a lot of fun with it. And ultimately, that's what the game was. And to be honest, I kept creating new scenarios or different game scenarios. Like the CST kind of evolved, and that was basically just I want more El Tigre. Like I want El Tigre in there. And even though El Tigre wasn't part of the original CST team, he did join the CST team later. James had created a character for that team as well. I think a couple of different characters. They weren't quite as memorable. They were still good, but they weren't quite as memorable. And what I really liked is that when James created a character, he created a character around concept. And here's what I'm saying is, when you're creating characters in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and I had a really big debate with a friend of mine over this. It's substance over form. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but what really makes tabletop role-playing games, D&D or Mutants and Masterminds or any game, what really makes a particular game stand out, and I don't mean a gaming system, but a particular campaign. What makes that campaign stand out is basically based upon how the players are creating characters and how much thought they put into it. The more thought they put into a character, and I don't mean on stats, I mean on creating a character concept. And by creating a character concept, I mean a history behind that character, explaining why the character is a particular way. Why are they good with knives? If you can come up with something very interesting, why the character is good with knives, it really explains a lot about who the person is, the character's personality is. And I think that's the art of tabletop gaming that you'll never find in a video game. In a video game, you're playing a pre-generated character. And if it's a character you're generating on your own, it's never going to be a character that you have you can't shape that person's personality. Even in a game like Mass Effect, where you can really decide which way a character is going, you still can't create personality. Their personality is going to be type A, type B, type C, but it's not going to be unique. When you're playing in a role-playing game, it's a combination of what that player brings to the table, their own personality, how much of their own personality they put within the character, and how much of their own personality they leave out of the character. So their character may do things that themselves they would never even consider trying. They may be multilingual, while in real life there's no way they would ever try anything like that. Or the funnest is when I have incredibly intelligent people around my table playing a dumb character, someone who is, a little stunted on the intelligence side, and they play a character that's dumb. That's fun too. The thing is, I think with tabletop gaming, that's what it revolves around. And in that respect, I gotta give kudos to James, definitely the longest running player I've had in any game. And also some of the longest running characters I've ever had in game. And Tigre, man, I'm going to be attaching a couple of pictures here with this podcast so you can just kind of see some of the characterizations of the character. But man, just amazing. And I really hope in the writing I had done on the Symka series, which was an interpretation of the game that we ran, I had a lot of fun playing with that character and writing the stories that we told with El Tigre. Just a phenomenal, well-rounded, most interesting character that's ever been in a game. So kudos to James. Thanks for... I don't think Symka would have existed in the way that it did, and I don't think I would have run the Symka game as long as I did if it wasn't for James. I don't think a lot of the things related to Symka that happened afterwards would have occurred. Would I have ever drawn a comic book or had a comic book published? No, probably not. I don't think I would have worked so hard to try to get that comic book published. I don't think I would have written it. I don't think I would have spent 3 years writing comic scripts for a series unless it was phenomenal. And it was super phenomenal. And the arc of the story, the arc of the characters within Symka, a lot of that had to do with how James was playing that character and really how he was working with me to tell an incredible story. So yeah, that's what I gotta say, man. I'm gonna sign out here. I think I've been geeky enough for this week. I think what I want to do is I want to go back and cover some other characters in future episodes. It's kind of interesting to hear what you guys say. As a GM, I'm not going to cover the characters I've created, but I'm going to cover the characters my players have created. So again, El Tigre, Joaquin Ramirez. Just awesome. Okay, so peace. We will talk to you next episode.